Thank you, Peter, for joining me for this interview today. I'd like to start by asking you what the term adaptive reuse means in your practice.
Most of the projects that we do are in urban contexts and quite often involve retaining all or part of a building on the site. And so in that sense, there's an element of adaptive reuse in all of the projects that we do. For me, adaptive reuse has a few categories of meaning. Probably the best known meaning is related to heritage buildings, but then more generally, the adaptive reuse of existing structures doesn't have to always involve heritage buildings. It just could be a reuse of a building that's able to be reused or adapted, and there's lots of good reasons for that. There's statutory reasons for reusing a building, and of course there's environmental reasons for reusing buildings or parts of buildings. But repurposing or renaming or remaking buildings are all parts of adaptive reuse. This building that we're in now was adaptively reused. This is our office building, and when we bought the building about, probably 20 years ago, it was a light industrial warehouse wholesale building, and it was built in the 1940s as a aircraft parts manufacturing building. We split the building up with a group of other people. We put apartments down the eastern end of the building, and we built our office in the western end of the building. So we always look for adaptive reuse possibilities on sites.
And why do you think that's important for urban areas? So why do we not simply demolish buildings and build new purpose-built structures when the useful life or the original function of, a building has reached, the end of its term?
Well, I think in cities, my experience is mostly Sydney, there's a kind of a language that exists and continues in cities, and the buildings are part of the vocabulary, and to retain that or aspects of that keeps a city dialogue, that speaks of its history and is then able to participate in the future of the city. So I think just those voices that buildings have in urban contexts is a really important and useful thing to try and maintain.
What are some of the challenges that you've been confronted with a project of this sort versus when your brief is a greenfield site or when you're expected to just demolish and start or create a new building altogether?
In a way, I think I find it easier now to work in a tight existing context, mainly because that's mostly what we do. It just provides cues, I suppose. Even if, in a sort of a tight residential context, even if you are knocking down the building completely, you're still in a strong context that you need to adapt to. So even small cleared sites have an aspect of adaptation where they have to adapt to the buildings that remain around them. I think adaptive reuse in a way is a little bit easier for the type of work that we do. That's not always the case in larger projects, and I think that people here, architects and developers, quite often ignore the benefits of adapting existing structures and prefer a greenfield site and a new building and a identity that they can claim as a sort of a dominant identity. So I think there's a lot about identity in new buildings, and people struggle with the personalities of existing buildings.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugo, for